Welcome to Kathryn Raaker's World. Innovation, culture, adventure, fashion and health, artists, destinations, traditions. This is Kathryn Raaker's World.
Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Let's Just Talk, our syndicated radio show, and our syndicated television show is Kathryn Raaker's World. Today, I am so honored again to have Anthony F. Bruce, CPA, who is our expert CPA on Let's Just Talk. Today, he discusses workhorse tax strategies that he uses with his clients, especially in real estate and software development. Anthony's specialties are in tax planning, advisory, and management and financial management, including CFO and accounting. Anthony F. Bruce, LLC, CPA is more than just an accountant. Tax advisory for small business and the self-employed. Welcome back, as usual. We've known each other for a long time, haven't we?
I know. Good to talk to you. Good to see you.
Good. So let's talk about what you mean by workhorse tax strategies.
Sure. So if I were operating a business today, if I was opening a business, and especially if I was in the sphere of software development or a tech company or someone who has rental properties, Airbnb, but even regardless of those two fields, which we tend to work a lot in, if I were a business owner, there'd be some strategies that I'd want to be looking at, right? In particular, I'd want to look at entity optimization, right? So the first thing you want to say to yourself is, okay, what form of entity should I have? And for a lot of folks, you know, there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers out there. There's a lot of third-party sites that'll allow you to establish a company. By the way, I always tell folks it's very easy to open a company. It's not so easy to shut one down and to operate one. So just about any person can go on and file some paperwork today electronically. Voila, have their company formed and operating in their state, especially if it's a single member company where there's not multiple owners, right? You're basically arguing with yourself on the left shoulder and the right shoulder, that type of thing.
Right.
But there's some basic strategies that I'd want to have in place. So the first thing I'd want to do is figure out, well, does it matter what kind of entity I have? Today, a lot of folks form an LLC, and generally that's not a bad thing. But what kind of LLC? I always tell people an LLC is kind of like the ice cream cone, the sugar cone itself, for example. And then the concept becomes, well, what flavor do you like inside of there? Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, something else. And those are where I say the tax efficiencies lie, right? So the nature of having an LLC, do you want to be taxed as a single member LLC? If there are multiple owners, do you want to be taxed as a partnership? Should it be converted to a corporation, a C corporation? Does it make sense to have that? The tax rates are the lowest they've been historically in many, many years for C corporations. Or do you want it to be an S corporation? So that's what I mean. And there's not just like a back of the envelope answer. It requires, and a lot of what I do on a daily basis with my clients, kind of like a doctor, not proposing that I'm a medical professional at all, but sort of like you want to do an X-ray or an MRI, or you want to do a diagnostic. You want to talk to the business owner about what they're doing, how they're doing it, when they're doing it. And that oftentimes will disclose what the best strategy is. And the same is true for entity optimization, right? So some of the things, if you have an S corporation, you need to have payroll. So there's an added burden, but that burden can be outweighed by some of the tax benefits that come into play with an S corporation. Conversely, if you're just a single member LLC and you want to not have a corporation status, you could certainly do so. But that would come with some inefficiencies from a tax point of view. So you might lose some benefits. It might increase certain types of taxes, for example, if you're just a single member LLC. But then again, depending upon the revenues, it may or may not make sense to be an S corp. And so these are the kind of questions, and this is the dialogue we get into with our clients when working with them proactively. We ask them what they're doing, how they're doing it, what their plans are, what the growth looks like, certainly what the revenues are looking like. Same thing with real estate ownership in terms of rental properties, Airbnbs, and especially with software development companies. How do you want to form the company? And then last but not least, especially with some of the tech companies, if you're going to go public, it may make sense to just remain a C corporation. So it all depends, but it's something that needs to be considered. It's not just as simple as subscribing to a service, checking a box and saying, hey, I'm an LLC and this is the way I want to operate. You really need to dig into it a little bit more to see what makes sense. And Kathryn, it's dynamic, right? It evolves over time. So for example, in the beginning, in a very simplistic way, you might want to be a single member LLC. Down the road, depending upon certain criteria, you may want to convert to an S corporation, or you may want to reorganize and become a C corporation. So it really depends. So that's one of the workhorse strategies that we look at, entity optimization. Sure, go ahead.
I was going to ask you a question. I have a broker that called me about you, and she is a food broker out of Texas and works with the AFIs. And unfortunately, her husband talked her into having a CPA, right? That was his friend, but he didn't use QuickBooks. She's going crazy right now and needs a consultation with the CPA on which way she should go, right? Because she does all of her invoicing on QuickBooks.
So again, there you go. Not necessarily a strategy per se, but regressing for a second, CPA work at times, as a matter of fact, 90% of the industry is compliance-based, right? That's what sets us apart. We're advisory, we're proactive, we're not reactive. However, in this case, being reactive, you need absolutely accurate books and records, right? Because at a minimum, you want to record your transactions correctly, whether that be QuickBooks, whether that would be a point of sale system that would be in front of QuickBooks. Like if you have a web-based store, or in this case, if it's a broker person and she is collecting commissions, I'm presuming maybe that's how her business is organized. She's collecting business commissions when she facilitates a deal for the food, whatever the food item may be, or produce, or fruits. So you definitely need something in this day and age, right? It's not going to pass any longer to not have a reasonable accounting system. It's really, what the gold standard is, whether it's QuickBooks, whether it's Xero, whether it's something else. There's opportunity there, especially with the cloud, where if you use a product like QuickBooks Online or Xero, multiple people, including myself, can have access to your client's data, and you can provide some insight into that, which leads us back to, so to answer your question is, yeah, that's something definitely we should take a look at, because here's the real reason. Aside from her being compliant, right? We want to look at her entity. So that's a workhorse strategy, because she may not be organized the way in which it's most efficient for her food company, brokerage company. But now the next thing is we want to take a look at her deductions. Like, what are the correct deductions? Is she capturing all those deductions? And we look at specific strategies that come into play, and we show people how to use the strategies. We show them with our software tools, the direct tax savings, but we also show her, in addition to, in this case, your food broker, if I were speaking to her, in addition to having accurate records for preparing the tax return and understanding cash coming in, cash going out, who do we owe, who owes us, so we can figure out what your revenues and expenses are. We then educate her on how to document the revenue, how to document the expenses, so that we're creating a plan and a roadmap with our workhorse strategies that stand up. They are defensible. So in a sense, by planning and being proactive as opposed to reactive, not only are we handling compliance, but we're also saving tax dollars and putting money on the table for her. By reducing her tax bill, we're improving her cash flow, especially a young business in its infancy that need all the cash flow that they can have. So yeah, and we would certainly talk to her about the strategies that are available to her and the deductions that are available to her. What do travel expenses look like? What their meals expenses look like? There's no entertainment, but does she have employees? Does she have events, marketing events for folks that are in her field? Does she have board meetings if she has a company formed? I don't know if she has an LLC formed or not. Does she have board meetings? Does she utilize her home in the business? Like, does she have a home office, for example, which we describe to her the difference between an administrative home office versus a home office or an office outside of her home. And we show her how to optimize and plan and model all that to get those deductions. So yeah, not only are we looking at the entity and optimizing it, but then we're training her and teaching her about workhorse strategies like accountable plans, which the IRS, that's the gold standard. The IRS wants to see an accountable plan under your expense deductions. The IRS wants to see, if you have a home office, what that looks like. How are you substantiating a home office? A lot of people think it's a flag. It is absolutely, in our experience, in our demographic, in our empirical data, it has not been a flag to be audited or examined. However, if you are audited or examined, if you're doing it correctly and we're holding your hand through that process, the goal would be to make sure we're substantiating it correctly and making sure that you're using it correctly. So that's what I mean when I workhorse strategies, because the goal is to reduce the tax bill legally, not playing fast and loose to get anybody in trouble. But also, when you reduce your tax bill, what do? You improve your cash flow, which is what you're referring to in terms of startup capital. Do you have the ability to withstand a month or two or not having revenues or stagnant revenue growth, or the initial investment to get the business up and running, to buy your technology, to rent an office, whatever that case may be. Although with COVID, post-COVID environment, a lot of folks are not renting offices as much, but you get the idea. You definitely need startup capital. And if you're proactively managing your situation, your revenue and expenses, and maximizing that and optimizing it, then yeah, you're gonna have better cash flow if you're reducing your tax bill. Same thing with software companies. One of the things we do a lot of with our startup companies, software, in particular in engineering companies, another workhorse strategy. It's, even though it's an advanced strategy with a tech company, it's a workhorse strategy, and that's the research and development tax credit, right? The increasing research and development tax credit is what that seeks to do. Is it seeks to capitalize on your development of a new product process, whether it's deliverable to a customer or whether it's used in-house, whether the outcome is successful or not. As a matter of fact, the outcome, there are 4 tenets to it. It has to be experimental in nature. We must not have a known outcome. The outcome can't be predetermined. We know what we expect of our result, but it's not guaranteed that result's going to occur. So that's another one of our workhorse strategies. And then last but not least, for our real estate friends out there, and I own real estate, and I also have a computer science degree, so I have a tech background. And back in the day, I was actually a software person, an engineer, literally, at Boeing. And cost segregation for our rental property folks. Another workhorse strategy is cost segregation. And what cost segregation does is it maximizes the depreciation deduction. But you need a study. You just can't do it willy-nilly. You just can't say, well, these pieces of the equation are depreciable better in a higher rate than some of the others. Here's the way cost segregation for the average person, Kathryn. You have rental property. If it's commercial, general rule is 39.5 years, right? If it's residential, the general rule is 27.5 years. So wouldn't it be wonderful if you could segregate the components of that $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $10 million commercial property, or even that $500,000 or $600,000 condo that you're renting out, especially if you're using it in an Airbnb and something like that? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could take the components of that building or those structures and segregate them so that you weren't stuck with just 39 years of depreciation or 27.5 years of depreciation? Wouldn't it be nice if you can get the depreciation number, the number of years, down to 10 years, 15 years? You're not going to zero out completely. You're playing with fire there. But if you could get better and higher depreciation deductions against your rental income, that's what cost segregation seeks to do. So we've talked about R&D tax credits for software developers and engineers and tech companies. And is there an opportunity, if you have rental properties, for cost segregation to benefit? Almost every property can benefit from cost segregation nowadays. And you need to have a study. The study would be done by us. It's an economic and technical study. And what it does is it goes into your folder and it increases your deductions. And then last but not least, the other workhorse strategies. How do we deduct our vehicle? How do we deduct our home office? What kind of entity makes sense for us? Do we have an accountable plan? Can we capture the expenses that we use personal devices? For example, suppose your cell phone bill comes in your name. There's a formal way that the IRS wants you. Not that they disbelieve that you don't use the phone for business, but is there a way to capture that expense that's billed to you personally as a business expense to document it? And this is what we do with planning, optimizing, modeling, developing the planning and meeting with our clients on it. We're different, right? We don't just see people at tax time. We see them a minimum of 4 times a year. That's what we require for you. And it's the best value. It's the best bang for your buck. It pays for itself to get together with me quarterly basis. And we go over, like right now, we've already met with a lot of clients where we know how they perform through the first half of the year. So there's not a surprise. Come September, October, November, oh my God, we're losing money, or oh my God, we're making so much money we didn't expect it. What could we do to reduce our tax bill? It's not that we're just seeing you drop. We don't work with people that want to just drop off a bunch of documents, say, here's my stuff, prepare, prep, and file a tax return. That's not the way we save you money on your taxes. That's the old way of doing things. The new way of doing things, being proactive, getting together on a quarterly basis. And guess what? It audit proofs you, right? You have a defensible package to put in front of the IRS if they should come knocking at the door.
Thank you very much. Don't forget to go to our website at KathrynRaakersWorld.com. And all of our websites are now in that big site. So let's just talk and everything else. The chef, you and I, we still have a chef show. So don't forget to join us every single week on Kathryn Raaker's World and Let's Just Talk. Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Kathryn Raaker's World, syndicated talk show, and Let's Just Talk, syndicated radio show. And I have the honor,
thank you,
honor of having Rita El-Mounayer.
very good.
Is that good? All right, I did the best I could. And you are the CEO of Satellite 7. Is that
That's
correct?
true, yes.
And the most influential female Christian media personality in the Middle East.
I'm not sure about that.
You're not sure? Okay. In North Africa, a native of Lebanon, Rita is spearheading the region's first ever Christian on-demand video service, propelling the gospel uncensored across MENA in Arabic, Farsi, Dari, and Turkish through smartphones and other digital devices. And being the CEO of Satellite 7, which is www.sat7usa.org, and the most influential female Christian media personality in the Middle East and North Africa, like I said before. You know, one of the things that, after living in the Middle East, it must be exciting to do what you're doing, especially as a woman.
I love it.
You love it.
Yeah,
I think.
love it. I love it because I could see the fruits of the many years of hard work trying to reach people's hearts with the love of Christ. A lot of people think that the Middle East is a gloomy place.
Not necessarily.
Well, a lot of people. And,
Right.
Terrorism comes from the Middle East. All the violence comes from the Middle East. Oppression of women, Middle East. This and that, wars, famine, Middle East. So all the time, the conflict between nations, Middle East. Shia, Sunni, Middle East. Israel, the position of Israel and all the neighboring countries, Middle East. So it's really a gloomy place. But I see it with the eyes of God. Not because I am very spiritual, no. I lived there. I paid a price living there. I lived during the war. I lost dear ones because of the war. I've been displaced many times in Lebanon. I paid a price for maybe, being a Christian in a neighborhood that is not Christian, but still I never give up. Because God used all the hardship and pain and challenges to make me the kind of person I am today, and it's not a cliche. I am who I am today because I didn't live a proper childhood, because I was living in a country of war, because I saw disasters around me. But God didn't see it this way. And now, if I tell you my story,
I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
It's not a unique one.
Right.
It is, like stories of many people, like in the Middle East that paid a huge price, but they were so resilient and persevere in order to use all what happened in their past to give a better future for the people there, for the future generation.
And the funny thing is, living in Turkey, which is a Muslim country, right? Basically,
Where
right?
did you live? Where were you? You remember?
I was in Ankara.
Ankara, okay.
And I didn't know at the time, I was on World Radio, Dunya Radio,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Didn't know, because I'd been in radio many years, right?
Yeah.
And didn't know that I was on an Islamic station until one day I tried to use women's music.
Yeah.
And the guy that I worked with said, he walked out. And I went, what's he going? Thank God I knew Turkish. I knew how to finish the show, right? But it was really an experience that I'll never forget as long as I live. Because there were so many people that were my friends that were missionaries in Turkey, disguised in different professions. And so did you grow up as a Christian?
I grew up as a Christian because Lebanon, I'm Lebanese, as I
Right.
said. It's a Christian country.
That's true.
It's the only Arab country
That is.
Arab country that is Christian. And I was in a conservative Christian house. We didn't practice a lot or thought about our faith, but the war brought faith back to our home. So we were insecure, afraid. My mom passed away during the war. I was a kid. I was 7 years old. My sister was 5. My dad was in the Christian militia. So we had big questions and struggles at home. But at the age of 15, I started going to church. And the funny thing,
Yeah.
you go to church and then, I'm not criticizing, like the church, but you go to church and they tell you, come to Jesus. When you come to Jesus, all your problems will go away. All your question will be answered. I came to Jesus, I still have problems. A lot of my questions are still unanswered.
Right.
But the difference is that you're not alone. You still have the problems, you were facing them before getting to know Jesus alone. Now he is there.
Right.
You still have, like a lot of questions that are not answered, but you trust, and you trust, and you trust. Mm-hmm. And you believe that whatever happened, nothing can separate you from the love of God. Jesus Christ, from the love of God through Jesus Christ.
Through Jesus Christ, right. And it was amazing to practice my religion in Turkey at the Vatican Embassy.
Oh, wow.
Because you couldn't practice it
anywhere else.
Yeah. But I met so many beautiful people, and they just put their arms around me. And I didn't see the war at that point. I didn't see what was going on. And once I got into the culture and the customs and the language, and I learned the language from the waiters at the hotel to begin.
Wow. Yeah.
And I love that part of the world. It's so beautiful, the Mediterranean Sea. I'd love to go to Lebanon. Really would love to see Lebanon.
But you know what you're saying? I mean, these people that you're describing now, the Turks, the Lebanese, and others, this is where Sat7 is. We are a Christian television station, 4 channels.
Oh, wow.
2 in Arabic, covering the Arab world.
Right.
1 in Turkish, covering Turkey.
Right.
And then 1 in Farsi, covering Iran and Afghanistan.
Wow.
With the Farsi language and Tajik and Dari. So we are just being there for the people, showing God's love to them, receiving their prayer requests, answering their questions, making programs for their children, for their youth, competition shows on satellite and on social media.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Serving these people that you're describing, these beautiful people that maybe sometimes perceived in the West, violence, oppressors, this. But these people, Set7 is there to comfort them with the Word of God, to reach out for
Right.
them, to show them love, to talk about reconciliation, of peace. Yes, maybe push a little bit with the freedom of religion and,
Right.
you know, like freedom of, you know, like for women, you know, like to speak up, to go to
Right.
workplace. So I feel like so blessed to be part of this ministry for many years now, like
Right.
28 years at the end of this month.
Right. This is wonderful. I mean, to be in the position that you're in, to be able to do what
Thank
you
you.
do. I mean, I know that when I was on radio in Turkey, all the troops would call me. And I had to learn jokes in Turkish. I had to learn the basic language and be able to pronounce it.
Do you still remember it? Not really.
There's a few things that I
Few things,
remember.
okay. Yeah.
Teşekkür ederim.
Yes.
And you know, I just have all my notes and everything,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's speaking it all the time that makes you feel good. And my teacher he taught English in a Turkish school, so I was very lucky. And he worked for the hotel, which was really exciting and fun, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And they became friends. They're still friends.
Good.
And I got to meet the president of Turkey,
Before-
Demirel.
okay,
No,
yeah,
not
yeah.
who it
That's
is
not
now.
that, no.
And we did a project called Partners in Art Education, where we raised money for the Turkish schools and hospitals for babies. And the Sheraton Hotel gave us the whole place for a whole week, where we had art from very famous artists
nice.
and children artists.
Very nice.
So
Good.
I loved every moment
Very
of
good.
it.
You should
So
go back.
Lebanon today, is there a certain place you live in Lebanon? And you live
I live now in Cyprus.
in Cyprus.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I heard
And
that.
you know Cyprus is divided into Greek
Yeah,
and Turkish.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, Lebanon today is suffering a lot. You know, like with the blast in 2020, if you remember the
I
whole
remember.
blast. And then now the economy is really, really bad. We don't have a president at the moment.
Right.
And it's a lot of conflict, especially with the Hezbollah in the region, without you know
Right,
like a president. You know, like
Right.
all this. So keep Lebanon in your prayers. And
I
Lebanon
do,
Is just,
I
it's
do.
just you know, an example. I mean, I shouldn't talk about Lebanon a lot. I'm Lebanese. I mean, now what's happening in Sudan, Yemen, you know, like with
I know
all
I
the
have nuns that
famine.
are stuck in Sudan. That
Yeah,
my best friend is a missionary sister,
Yeah.
and she said, make sure you pray for them
Yes.
because they can't get out.
Yes.
And so, you know, and I had friends that were in Turkey that were Americans married to Turkish, and they couldn't get out. And they wanted to get out, they couldn't. But I love Greece, I love Cyprus. I think those are beautiful places, and I've been to Greece.
Yeah.
So I'd love to come to Cyprus someday.
You're welcome.
I'd love to. I'd love
Welcome. We
to.
have a huge studio in Cyprus. Well, not huge. It was a big studio where all our Iranian team
Oh, wow.
record their programs. You know, like there. So if you come, we'll show you a tour of the studio. You will meet
Right.
the Iranian team,
Right.
and hopefully you will hear beautiful stories of changed lives from the team. You know, like
Right.
in Iran.
Right. I have a lot of friends that are Iranian.
Yeah.
I do. A very, very good friend of mine who's actually in California. He's an Iranian Jew.
Oh wow.
And they came to
Yes.
New York, and he built some of the biggest buildings in commercial buildings in New York, his family. And then he went to Hollywood, or not to San Bernardino. His name is Kambiz Marabi.
Rabbi. Okay.
And he's just a super person. I mean, I think we have to wrap the show up. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining me
you, thank
today.
you.
It's such a
Bless you.
pleasure. Is there a way that I can contact you in Cyprus?
I'll give
Please
you my
do.
card like after the
Okay, that's right.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for coming and
Thank you.
sharing your story with us.
Thank
It's
you.
so important to get that message out. Thank you.
Thank you.
And where can people find you?
It's www.set7usa.org. So
Okay.
set7 SAT number 7 dot USA.org.
All right, and thank you so very
Thank
much.
you.
And you can find us on Kathryn Raaker's World and Let's Just Talk. And thank you again.
Thank you.
So much, so much.